I've been asking myself, what does the Bible have to offer to help us deal with and make some sense out of the chaos that we've been experiencing for the last few months and has only become worse the last couple of weeks? I decided I wanted to do some kind of a study that would kind of help us for a period of time and use the hodgepodge videos to do that. And so I just was wondering, what in the world would be good to study? Well, I considered several things. I considered looking at the examples from Judah and Israel in the Old Testament and some of their history and as they encountered the world. And my mind went to Psalm chapter 2, verses 1 and 2, when he says, "Why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth take their stand, and the rulers conspire together against the Lord and his anointed one." That could have been a good way to go, but I just kept thinking, and I said, well, there's an old standby. We could always go and talk about loving your neighbor. Now, it would be more than just that statement. We could study the implications of the decision that we would agree with God that we love our neighbor and discuss what kind of difference that would make in the way we treat people in general, but especially as we would focus on the evils of racism. I also thought, well, maybe we can take a walk through the life of Jesus. We can watch him as he relates to all kinds of people and how that becomes our call as we're Christians who bear the name of Jesus, to follow his example in everything. We would do just what he would do. But I came back to studying the book of Ecclesiastes. We'll talk more about why, but before we go to even introduce the study, I'd like to kind of say, here's where I am in this day and time. My sympathies are scattered in many directions. I am sympathetic to the people of color who have been sorely wronged, who have been denigrated and treated lowly by the evils, hatred of prejudice in our history. I'm sympathetic to the people of color who currently are experiencing anything less than, well, total equality. My sympathies also, in a real way, go out to George Floyd's friends and family as well as they mourn the death of their son or their brother or their dad, friends. I also have a sympathy that goes out to the great majority of the police who are being falsely accused and demeaned. They're being degraded by the treatment and the accusations that are leveled at them as a result of, well, a few vile, evil police who are out of control. My sympathies also go out to the families of those police officers and others who have been killed during the riots that are sweeping our country. My sympathies go out to the people also who have risked everything to start a business and to work it hard and to spend years and many years for some, all to have it destroyed in one night, burnt, looted. My sympathies also go out to those who lost everything as a result of the COVID-19. And now it's being finished off by the riots. I'm not on a side. I don't feel like I need to choose a side. I don't have a side. I'm sympathetic to those who experience any of the evils that are occurring. And so that's where I am. Not making light of anyone's experience, not making light of anyone's efforts. It's just where I'm at. Now, the question we asked was, what does the Bible have to offer that can help us deal with the chaos that we're going through? I tell you, I chose Ecclesiastes. Now, it's written by David's son, Solomon. And Solomon must have been pretty old at the time. It's kind of like he's looking back and saying, here's what I've learned about life in the world. Solomon was believed to have been in maybe his 20s when he became king over Israel. And he died at about, 59. The days of his reign, along with the days of his father David's reign, were called the Golden Age of Israel. It was a great time of prosperity. One other thing that led me to the decision to look at Ecclesiastes was what I found in 2 Chronicles chapter 1 and verse 12. By looking at what God gave Solomon. Notice, it's God speaking. He says, wisdom and knowledge are given to you. I will also give you riches, wealth, and glory, unlike what has been given to the kings who were before you, or will be given to those who come after you. Wow. If anyone can help us learn how to deal with life, how to view life, it would be Solomon, a man who has had the wherewithal to try everything. He's had the wisdom and the knowledge to know everything. And so here he is living his life. And the book of Ecclesiastes is him saying, here's what it's been like. If ever there was someone who could find meaning outside of God, it would be Solomon. If anybody could do it. He had all that the world has to offer. He had the best opportunity to give it a shot. Solomon had everything. He accumulated wealth. He discovered knowledge. He gained prestige and experienced pleasure. And he didn't do it in moderation, but he did it big way. I'd like to continue with reading just some passages from Ecclesiastes, from 1 Kings, and from 2 Chronicles. These passages are all about the same thing. It's about specifically what Solomon had, what of the world Solomon had control of and had the ability to use in becoming and finding the good life, if you will, that there is without God. We'll see. In Ecclesiastes chapter 1 and verse 16, we read, and this is Solomon speaking, I said to myself, see, I have amassed wisdom far beyond all those who were over Jerusalem before me, and my mind has thoroughly grasped wisdom and knowledge. But he gets real specific in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, beginning in verse 4 through verse 10. Very specific. Now notice the detail of his explanation of all that he had that the world had to offer. He says, I increased my achievements. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made gardens and parks for myself, and I planted every kind of fruit tree in them. I constructed reservoirs for myself from which to irrigate a grove or of flourishing trees. I acquired male and female servants and had slaves who were born in my house. I also owned livestock, large herds and flocks, more than all who were before me in Jerusalem. I also amassed silver and gold for myself, and the treasure of kings and provinces. I gathered male and female singers for myself and many concubines, the delights of men. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. My wisdom also remained with me, and all that my eyes desired, I did not deny them. I did not refuse myself any pleasure. Now that's the kind of guy at the end of his life I want to talk to and say, did it work? In 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 1 through 3, we hear King Solomon loved many foreign women, in addition to Pharaoh's daughter, Moabite, Ammonite, Edomites, Sidonite, Hittite women. He had 700 wives who were princesses, they were royalty, and 300 who were concubines. Now we look at 2 Chronicles chapter 9, beginning in verse 13 through verse 28. But again, it's interesting because he mentions so many specific things that were a part of his life experience because of all that he possessed. We begin reading verse 13. The weight of gold that came to Solomon annually was 25 tons. Now that's annually that came. Besides what was brought by the merchants and the traders, all the Arabian kings and governors of the land also brought gold and silver to Solomon. King Solomon made 200 large shields of hammered gold. 15 pounds of hammered gold went into each shield. He made 300 small shields of hammered gold. 7.5 pounds of gold went into each shield. The king put them in the house of the forest. The king also made a large ivory throne and overlaid it with pure gold. The throne had 6 steps. There was a footstool covered in the gold for the throne armrest on either side of the seat, and 2 lions standing beside the armrest. 12 lions were standing there on the 6 steps, one at each end. Nothing like it had ever been made in any other kingdom. All of King Solomon's drinking cups were gold. All of the utensils of the house of the forest of Lebanon were pure gold. There was no silver, since it was considered as nothing in Solomon's time. For the king's ship kept going to Tarshish, and Hiram's servants, and once every 3 years, the ships of Tarshish would arrive bearing gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. King Solomon, it says, surpassed all the kings of the world in riches and wisdom. All the kings of the world wanted an audience with Solomon to hear the wisdom God had put in his heart. Each of them would bring his own gift, items of silver and gold, clothing, weapons, spices, and horses and mules as an annual tribute. Solomon had 4,000 stalls for horses and chariots and 12,000 horsemen. He stationed them in the chariot cities and with the king in Jerusalem. He ruled over all the kings from the Euphrates River to the land of the Philistines and as far as the border of Egypt. The king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stones, and he made cedar as abundant as cypress in the Judean foothills. They were bringing horses for Solomon from Egypt and from all the countries. Solomon had everything that a man could ever want that the world has to offer. And so he's the guy I want to talk to and ask him, did it work? Was life an abundant thing? Did you have a great life because you could do all this? And is that direction you would suggest that people go, that they just leave God to the side, but they pursue all that the world has to offer? We'll begin talking about that in chapter 1 when we begin in the next study.